Australia's coastline teems with life, but beneath the idyllic surface lurks danger. Great whites, tigers, and bull sharks. These apex predators rule the depths. From unsuspecting swimmers to seasoned divers, encounters with these powerful creatures have left a legacy of terror and respect. This is the shocking history of shark attacks in Australia, where paradise and peril exist side by side. The sun blazed a relentless path across the water, transforming the stretch of ocean off Western Australia's Ningaloo Reef into a shimmering expanse. It was a long weekend in 2002, and a small boat bobbed amidst the blue, carrying 4 friends on a shared adventure. There was Alex, a graphic designer weighed down by his city life and a nagging mortgage. Beside him stood Ben, a mechanic whose hands were stained with grease and whose easy smile hid a streak of cynicism. Ryan, a boisterous salesman with a joke for every occasion, brought an undeniable energy to their outing. The quietest among them was Thomas, Alex's cousin. A marine biologist by trade, he moved through life with an observant eye and an almost unsettling calm. While the others joked and bickered, Thomas often looked down at the clear water, his mind likely filled with facts about the creatures swimming below the surface. Ningaloo Reef was renowned for its diverse marine life, a kaleidoscope of fish, corals, and the occasional majestic whale shark. But Thomas's fascination and the source of his occasional warnings centered on the region's less welcome visitors. Great white sharks patrol these waters, apex predators that demanded respect and instilled a healthy dose of fear. The thought of encountering one sent a shiver through the men, even as they secretly hoped to glimpse a fin cutting through the waves. The morning passed in a pleasant rhythm. Laughter rang out with each fish caught. Stories from their lives back on land intermingled with excited shouts and bursts of profanity from Ben whenever a line got tangled. Ryan, ever the opportunist, hooked into something monstrous around noon, and the ensuing struggle drew whoops and cheers from the others. When they finally hauled their prize on board, a giant shimmering tuna, spirits soared. Visions of a beachside feast filled their heads. Their idyllic day took a dark turn when the engine sputtered into silence. Ben, their resident mechanic, bent over the tangled machinery, his usual confidence slowly eroding. Alex, no stranger to deadlines and unforeseen problems, felt unease settle in his stomach. The ocean's vastness surrounded them, a reminder of their vulnerability. Suddenly, Thomas pointed towards the reef, his voice strained. A massive fin broke the surface, carving a path straight towards their boat. Ryan's laughter ceased. Ben froze mid-repair, and Alex's heart hammered against his ribs. The predator circled a silent promise of danger. They were no longer guests in its domain, but potential prey. The long shadows of the setting sun made the water seem even more ominous, and the last threads of their earlier cheer dissolved into a tense, unspoken fear. The great white struck without warning. Ryan, the closest to the railing, had been struggling with the outboard motor when the monstrous fish erupted from the depths. The boat lurched violently as the shark breached, all teeth and thrashing power. Ryan screamed, a sound cut brutally short as he disappeared in a spray of crimson and churned water. Ben and Alex, paralyzed with shock, scrambled for life jackets. Their hands shook uncontrollably. Thomas, though, seemed to snap out of his frozen state. He grabbed the radio, barking a desperate mayday into the crackling device. His voice echoed with a terrified urgency that mirrored the pounding of Alex's heart. The ocean, moments ago familiar territory, was now a scene of pure horror. The water churned with an almost oily sheen. A single tooth the size of a man's hand bobbed in the spreading stain, a gruesome trophy from the attack. Ben collapsed, great heaving sobs racking his body. His usual mask of toughness was shattered, leaving only a broken man. Alex could only stare, his mind unable to process the sheer brutality of Ryan's end. Only minutes ago they'd been laughing. Now there was only silence and the lingering smell of blood. Thomas, the man of facts, was now a man of action. He scanned the waters frantically, searching for any sign of Ryan, of the shark. There was nothing. The realization hit them like a wave. They were adrift with no engine, witness to an unseen predator lurking beneath the surface. Alex took up the grisly task of patching up the holes in their boat, remnants of the shark's frenzied assault. His hands trembled, but a tiny sliver of determination pushed back against the fear with each progress. They had to stay afloat, and they hoped rescue was on the way. Darkness fell with startling swiftness, plunging them into a terrifying new reality. No longer a playground, the ocean became a realm of shadows and unseen terrors. But they were not alone. Strange, glowing shapes materialized beneath the boat, bioluminescent plankton, disturbed by their frantic movements, painting the water with an eerie light. It was as beautiful as it was terrifying, a reminder of the sea's wonders and horrors in its depths. A desperate plan formed in Alex's mind as the night wore on. Taking a length of rope, he tied a life jacket to one end and lowered it into the water, the glowing plankton swirling around it. It was a long shot, a distraction tactic. The shark could be drawn to the movement and leave their battered boat alone. The hours dragged by and sleep was impossible. Ben mumbled incoherently, lost in his grief. Thomas stared out at the vastness, his jaw clenched. And Alex watched his makeshift lure, hoping against hope that it was buying them time. With the first hints of dawn, a cry went up, not of terror but of relief. On the horizon, the unmistakable shape of a search plane cut through the morning sky. Tears welled in their eyes as the aircraft grew closer, the roar of its engines promising salvation. In the end, they were found, battered, dehydrated, and forever scarred by their ordeal. They had survived the night, the predator, and their greatest fears. The price they paid was high. They would carry the memory of Ryan, the glistening tooth, and the sheer terror of being adrift at the mercy of the sea for the rest of their lives. Sasha Bennett wasn't just a surfer. In those moments when water and speed and pure instinct collided, she wasn't just riding the wave. She was a part of its thundering power. This stretch of Queensland coastline, with its hidden coves and fickle tides, had been her classroom since she was old enough to hold a board. She knew its moods, its secrets, even its dangers. Today was different. Today, tucked into the curve of the Gold Coast on a blazing May morning in 2004, everything hinged on ambition. Sasha, 17 years old and burning with dreams too big for her little town, was chasing more than just the perfect swell. This was her breakout year. Nationals, sponsorship deals, maybe even a shot at the world tours. She'd make her dad proud and prove to herself that even after her mom's death, she could handle whatever life threw at her. Her practice spot, breakaway point, was a beast even on good days, the kind of place the grizzled veterans liked to test their mettle and where the weekend warriors rarely dared to venture. Sasha thrived on the challenge, the way the currents shifted out here, the way a wave could build into a roaring wall of water in seconds. Of course, with those unpredictable swells came the occasional less welcome visitor. Bull sharks, especially, are drawn by the churned-up water and the promise of a meal. Old Maka, the weathered surf shop owner with his missing finger and shark-tooth necklace, had wagged a finger at her yesterday, muttering warnings. Sasha hid her shiver of fear with a cheeky grin. She was too strong, fast, and good to become some shark's breakfast. Paddling out this morning, muscles warm and heart pounding, a sliver of unease crept in. It warred with the familiar adrenaline rush. Fear was the enemy, and she'd wrestled it to the ground more times than she could count. Her first few rides were exhilarating. She knew her form was perfect, honed by years of early mornings and relentless practice. Then she saw it. Out on the fringe of her vision, a dark shape arced through the water. It surfaced again, closer this time. That wasn't a dolphin. Too thick, too blunt, the familiar surge of adrenaline turned icy. That shape, that relentless movement was unmistakable. But she was too far out, too far from the safety of the shore, too far from anyone who could help. And it was getting closer. The world exploded into chaos. One moment Sasha was balanced on her board, scanning for the next wave. The next, the shark erupted from the depths, a torpedo of muscle and teeth. Its massive body knocked her from her board, tumbling into the water. Pain seared through her leg, a fiery ripping sensation. Then the shark was back, pulling her under with horrifying force. Her lungs screamed as the water closed over her head, salt choking her. She glimpsed its open maw through the murky blue, a jagged line of razor-sharp teeth. Sasha clawed and kicked with the primal strength of desperation, but its grip was relentless. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pull eased. She was free, but only for a moment. The shark circled back, blood trailing in the water, its dark eyes cold and fixed on her. Sasha surfaced, gasping and sputtering. her injured leg burning, barely able to keep her head above the water. The beach seemed impossibly far away. She kicked frantically, one-armed, propelled by a surge of fear she'd never known. Her board bobbed nearby, but the shark was between her and her lifeline. She thought of her dad, his tired face etched with worry lines, and a wave of anger surged through her, fueling her determination. Behind her, the monstrous fish turned, beginning another charge. Sasha lunged for her board, ignoring the white-hot pain. The shark closed in, its open jaws a gaping terror. She yanked the board up, a pathetic shield, and braced herself for the impact. There was a splintering crunch and a blinding flash of pain as the shark latched onto the board, tearing a huge chunk away. Sasha, propelled by the force of the attack, found herself airborne for a split second before crashing back into the water a few meters away. The shark circled again, disoriented, and Sasha used the precious seconds to paddle madly towards the distant shore. Her injured leg throbbed with each clumsy stroke. She knew the blood would attract the predator back and knew that time was running out. Every time a ripple broke the surface, her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She imagined those monstrous teeth clamping onto her leg again, the terrible drag into the dark depths. Wave after relentless wave, she pushed on, driven by the raw, desperate need to survive. Her breaths came in ragged gasps as her muscles protested, but she refused to give in. The beach, once a distant smudge, grew closer with agonizing slowness. Her arms felt like lead, her wounded leg a useless weight. Then a glimmer of hope emerged. A figure appeared on the shoreline, waving frantically, a fellow surfer. Her voice, raw and weak, barely carried over the sound of the surf, but she screamed for help. The figure plunged into the water, paddling toward her with powerful strokes. With renewed energy, Sasha somehow found the strength to push on. The shark hadn't reappeared, perhaps drawn away by the new presence in its territory. The other surfer reached her, helped her onto his board, and paddled them to safety. As Sasha collapsed on the sand, the sobs came in great shuddering waves mingled with relief. Her leg throbbed relentlessly. The world blurred around her, but she was alive. They'd cheated the ocean, cheated death, and the taste of victory was sharper than the salt water stinging her eyes. Some men chase storms. Liam Carter chased the ocean secrets. Not the tourist trap reefs with their gaudy fish and selfie-taking snorkelers, but the places where light faltered and the creatures of the deep held dominion. Places like the Devil's Lair, a maze of underwater caves off the coast of New South Wales. It was June 2005, a Tuesday stolen from his work as a marine biologist and a perfect morning for a solo dive to fuel his obsession. Mornings in the lab were a dull ache. Surrounded by students buzzing with youthful enthusiasm, he felt a pang of the forgotten adventurer within. His work wasn't behind a microscope. It was out there, where the rules of nature were written in salt and blood, where the line between predator and prey blurred with the currents. Cave diving was his drug, that weightless freedom mixed with a shot of pure, heart-pounding terror. It was where he felt truly alive. Sarah, his girlfriend with her sensible job and worried frown, never entirely understood. He'd tried to explain, watching her eyes cloud over with concern he couldn't wholly dismiss. He'd tell her it wasn't about defying death. It was about feeling more alive than he ever did on dry land. She loved him, honestly. But some part of him, the part the ocean understood, couldn't be tamed by quiet dinners and promises of safety. This morning, while his colleagues prepped for lectures, he slipped away. The salty tang of the ocean greeted him like an old friend. Gearing up was a ritual, checking the seals, listening to the hiss of the regulator, and methodically preparing a way to calm the thrill coursing through his veins. The Devil's Lair had a reputation for a reason. Tiger sharks, nasty buggers with teeth like steak knives, patrolled these waters. Inside the caves, they were less likely. Still, the knowledge lurked beneath his bravado like a riptide, the possibility of a sleek shadow emerging from the darkness. The first descent was always a baptism. His city skin, softened by too much time under fluorescent lights, prickled with the change in pressure. Down here, his dive computer was his lifeline, beeping out the dwindling oxygen, his only guard against the silent, crushing death of an empty tank. His light pierced the gloom, dancing off the smooth rock walls. The lair was a marvel, each passage carved by time, by the relentless power of the ocean. A school of startled fish shimmered past, nervous prey echoing his heightened senses. The further he ventured, the deeper the thrill. Out here he was an explorer, a modern Magellan facing the unknown, armed with only his tanks and a thirst for the unexplored. The first hint wasn't a sight but a change of pressure. Liam felt something off in the water, a small change that made his skin tingle. He stopped, shining his light into the dark. Then he caught sight of movement at the corner of his eye, a quick glimpse of a powerful tail vanishing around a cave corner. Tiger shark. His heart hammered in his chest. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but years of diving kicked in. "Stay calm," his inner voice commanded. "Assess, don't react." The shark was big, longer than him, but here, in the dark confines, its size was a disadvantage. The cave was his territory now, the twisty passages a maze he knew better than any predator. He pressed himself against a rocky outcropping and waited. There, it circled back, likely drawn by the disturbance in the water and the beam of his light. Its pale belly gleamed in the momentary illumination, rows of jagged teeth visible in its gaping maw. Liam held his breath, willing himself to become invisible. The shark cruised past, slow and deliberate, its cold eyes mere inches from where he hid. It was a territorial display, a warning. This was its kingdom. A surge of adrenaline flooded Liam's system, a strange mix of terror and the thrill of facing such raw power. He had to get out of there, but retreating the way he'd come was out of the question. The shark would be waiting. The cave system might offer an alternative route. Taking a calculated risk, Liam ventured deeper into the maze, his light cutting a path through the darkness. Time was his enemy now, each breath taking him closer to the point where his tanks would be empty, and his lungs would scream for air. His computer beeped an urgent warning, its flashing numbers a grim countdown. If he didn't surface within minutes, no rescue would be possible. He knew the stats, knew how quickly a dive could turn deadly. He thought of Sarah, her face etched in his memory, and the familiar wave of anger mixed with guilt surged through him. He'd been reckless and selfish. Another shift in pressure, stronger than before, and the smell of fish in the water grew stronger. The shark had returned, circling closer. Liam squeezed into a crevice, trying to become one with the rock, praying the shark would pass him by. He wasn't a meal, he was an intruder. Sharks didn't attack for fun, did they? A jolt ran through him as something massive bumped the rock face. The shark knew he was there. A flurry of sand and silt reduced visibility to nothing. Fear choked him as blind panic threatened to take over. He couldn't die here, not in this dark, water-filled tomb. Fighting down the terror, he forced himself to focus. Think. Then an idea, desperate yet his only chance. Pulling a dive knife from his belt, he carved deliberate scratches on the rock, sending vibrations through the water. It was a long shot. Maybe the shark would sense this as coming from a rival, another predator to be wary of. Minutes passed, each agonizingly slow and marked by the beep of his dive computer. Then, miraculously, the pressure eased. The shark was gone, perhaps lured away by the deception. Liam, weak with relief, propelled himself towards the surface. His lungs burned and spots danced before his eyes, but he was driven by a frantic primal need to breathe. Bursting through the surface into the sunlight felt like a rebirth. He gasped for air, his body trembling. The ordeal wasn't over. He had to get back to shore before his tanks were entirely depleted. Still, in this moment of survival, he felt a fierce, undeniable gratitude for every breath. Liam clung to a nearby rock formation, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He had cheated death, but the victory was fragile. His air was nearly gone, and the boat that would have been a safeguard was probably miles away. With a shaky hand, Liam activated his emergency surface marker sausage, a bright orange inflatable tube that signaled distress. It bobbed on the surface, a beacon in the vast blue. Then hope flickered on the horizon. A fishing boat drawn by the marker changed course and churned towards him. He weakly waved his arms, praying they saw him. Minutes stretched into eternity, but the boat closed the distance. Strong hands pulled him aboard, hauling him back from the watery depths. As they checked his vitals and wrapped him in warm blankets, Liam breathed in relief. He was alive. Scarred, changed, but alive. The news of his near-death experience spread like wildfire. The local papers dubbed him the cave diver who cheated death. Sarah rushed to his side, her relief laced with anger. He held her close, apologizing for the fear he'd caused. Liam continued to dive, but now he was with a team, with a buddy, and with a healthy fear that kept him sharp. The thrill was still there, but tempered by a newfound appreciation for life, for the salty kiss of the sea on his face, and for the woman who worried but loved him enough to let him chase his dreams, even the ones that danced with danger. The waters of the Great Australian Bight shimmered under the harsh glare of the July sun. It was 2007, the depths of winter in South Australia. Still, for marine biologist Anya Petrova, the water was a second home. Today it would be a battleground. Anya wasn't your typical beach bunny. She'd grown up in the harsh beauty of the Russian north, with snow swirling where others saw sand. But she'd always dreamt of the ocean, its vast mystery calling to her even as a small girl. Now, working on her doctorate, she spent her days chasing the secrets of the world's apex predators, sharks. Her study site, a remote stretch of coastline known as Neptune's Playground, was infamous for great white sightings. These weren't mindless killing machines of the movies, but creatures of strategy and incredible power. Anya longed to understand them, to help shatter the myths that led to senseless culls and an unbalanced ecosystem. Today was about observation. She and her research partner, grizzled old Tomo, would descend into a shark cage anchored just off a known seal colony. It was controversial work. Some said using bait was too risky, but Anya believed the insight gained was worth it. The ride to the study site was choppy, the boat slapping the waves. Tomo regaled her with tales of close calls and scars earned over the years. His gruffness masked a grudging respect for her knowledge, a newcomer accepted into the old boys' club of shark research. As they neared their destination, Anya's heart thumped a counterpoint to the thrum of the boat's engine. This wasn't about bravery. It was about facing a fundamental instinctive fear. Sharks were wired into the oldest parts of the human brain, whispering of teeth and darkness and the fragility of flesh. The water here had an oily sheen, and the smell of fish was strong. A fur seal zipped past the boat, its dark eyes wary. Anya knew this was the shark's hunting ground, and she was stepping directly into the arena. It wasn't about conquering her fear, but living alongside it long enough to do her work. The cage was lowered with a resounding splash. Tomo, after a lifetime of dives, stayed topside, eyes glued to the water. Strapping on her gear, Anya felt a familiar mix of excitement and the prickle of pure, undiluted terror. This was where she thrived, on that knife edge between wonder and oblivion. The first sighting was breathtaking. Its gray skin blended with the murky water, and a massive form materialized from the deep. The great white cruised past the cage, its black eye seemingly fixated on her. Anya, heart-pounding, filmed the encounter, her scientific mind battling a surge of pure primal terror. This was beauty and brutality embodied. The shark circled, its movements mesmerizingly fluid. Anya knew the routine: assess the potential meal and test the defenses. The cage wasn't an obstacle, more of an annoyance, but it would protect her, mostly. She'd seen the footage, those massive jaws capable of biting through steel. Then it happened. The shark charged, a torpedo of muscle and teeth. It slammed into the cage, the impact jarring her teeth. It thrashed and circled, frustrated. Anya clung to the bars, fighting against a wave of nausea as the cage swayed violently. Then, silence. She risked a glance out. Nothing. Had it given up? Anya struggled to regulate her breathing. Above, she could just make out the silhouette of the boat. Tomo would be watching, worried but unable to help. Her lifeline was the comm system hooked to her mask. She activated it, her voice barely more than a frightened whisper against the static. A reply echoed back, tense and strained, hinting at an unseen complication. The line crackled, then cut off, leaving Anya alone with the terrifying implication of whatever was hampering the winch. Panic flared. Being stuck above water was dangerous enough, attracting more sharks. But stuck underwater, that was a death sentence. Minutes ticked by, each one agonizingly slow. She scanned the water, desperately searching for a sign of her attacker. Then, the water pressure changed, a prickling on her neck. The shark was back. It circled the cage as if assessing it for flaws. Anya knew her time was running out. If Tomo couldn't free the cage, she'd drown, trapped within feet of the surface. But she wasn't helpless. Years of studying shark behavior flickered through her panic. She'd read theories. Tapping the snout would confuse a shark and disrupt its attack pattern. It was a long shot, but it was her only shot. Grabbing a spare camera rod, she took a deep, steadying breath and reached through the bars. The shark turned, sensing the movement. She lunged out, tapping it on the snout twice, thrice. The shark recoiled, momentarily disoriented by her counterattack. Anya lunged back, her heart pounding with terror and desperate hope. It was working. But she knew time was not on her side. She repeated the action, a desperate gamble against the looming threat. The shark backed off again. Its movement slowed, seemingly confused by the unexpected resistance. Suddenly, the cage jerked upwards. Tomo's voice, filled with urgency, crackled through the comms. Anya scrambled towards the ladder as the cage was winched up with agonizing slowness. Her eyes were fixed on the water below, where the shark still circled ominously. Breaking the surface felt like a resurrection. Gulping ragged breaths, Anya collapsed on the deck, Tomo's face a mask of relief. He helped her out of her gear with rough hands that were surprisingly gentle. When the cage was back on deck, he turned and gunned the engine, speeding away. Only as the shoreline came into view, Anya allowed herself to cry. It was relief, terror, and a newfound respect for the thin line between researcher and prey. She had stared death in the eye and lived to tell the tale. From this day on, her work wouldn't just be academic. It would be a testament, a tribute to the magnificent, terrifying creatures that ruled the deep. The night air held the salty tang of the open ocean. Off the coast of Victoria, where the Bay Strait churned with restless energy, a lone boat bobbed under the vast expanse of the night sky. It was August 2009, and for Elias Walker, this was where the world made sense. Elias wasn't a weekend angler seeking easy trophies for bragging rights. He was one of the old breeds, with a weathered face lined with more stories than smiles. Fishing wasn't a hobby for him. It was in his blood, a legacy from his grandfather and generations before. This was the hour he loved best, the quiet broken only by the waves, the distant cries of seabirds, and the comforting rumble of his boat's engine. He'd left the crowded docks far behind, seeking the deep waters where the considerable fish lurked. The riskier the spot, the greater the reward. Some called him crazy, a man pushing his luck too far. He just shrugged. He was against nature, and nobody ever won against the ocean. As he said his lines tonight, Eli felt a tingle of anticipation. This wasn't just about putting food on the table. His wife Sarah and their 2 boys depended on his catch, but that wasn't what drove him deep down. He craved the fight, the thrill of pitting himself against unseen monsters lurking below. He knew the dangers, the sudden storms, the rogue waves, the creatures most didn't believe existed in these waters. Tiger sharks were one of those creatures. They favored warmer climates, but fishermen whispered stories and sightings of solitary beasts venturing south in search of prey. The tales hinted at myth mixed with terror, fishermen disappearing without a trace and battles fought and lost in the darkness. It was a fear Eli shoved into the deepest recesses of his mind. Tonight he was focused on the task at hand. He knew his lines, his knots, his boat, and his own strength. His first few catches were decent. Snapper, a plump flathead, good eating, good money at the market. But Eli was restless, hungry for something more. Shifting to a sturdier rod, heavier bait, he cast out and sank back against the railing. The distant lights of the shore were a faint shimmer on the horizon. The time he was dissolved into the boat's rocking and the sea's endless rhythm. It was a trance-like, meditative, until his line tightened with a force that jolted him from his thoughts. The line whipped from his hand, sizzling with friction and digging into his skin. Eli braced himself against the railing, shock turning to grim determination. This was no ordinary fish. This was the fight he'd craved, and it might just be the one that killed him. Hauling back on the rod was like pulling against a truck. The unseen creature on the other end surged and dived, a monstrous force straining his line to the breaking point. It was too powerful to haul on board. Instead, he'd have to tire it out, let it thrash, and fight until it weakened. It was a dangerous gamble, but Eli had gambled with his life before. Hours slipped by in a haze of agony and constant battle. Liam's hands were blistered, his muscles ached, but he persevered with the stubborn resilience typical of his kind. Suddenly, the creature broke through the surface, its silver form flashing. Eli's stomach churned. Tiger shark. Its huge eyes glinted in the moonlight, easily twice the size Liam had ever encountered. He hadn't hooked this monster. It had hooked him. One wrong move and it would drag him overboard and into those gaping jaws lined with hundreds of razor-sharp teeth. He cursed himself for his recklessness, for chasing this fight too far. Sarah's worried face flashed in his mind, then the laughter of his boys on their last fishing trip. If he died tonight, they'd be left with nothing but an empty boat and whispers of a man lost to the sea. The shark lunged once more, closer now, a terrifying show of strength and pure malice. It was assessing him, not just as prey, but as a challenger to its domain. Eli knew he couldn't cut the line. The thrashing hook could catch on his clothes and become a deadly weight. He braced himself, waiting for the next surge. It came with brutal force. The shark tore the rod from his hands, hurtling him towards the edge with bone-jarring force. Just as his torso hit the railing, something snagged at his leg. Then searing pain. The shark had tangled in the line, sinking its teeth into his calf with a vice-like grip. Instinct took over. Eli grabbed the rope, hauling himself upwards. Pain seared through him, but he clung on, his weight creating tension that pulled the thrashing shark partially aboard. In frenzied desperation, he snatched up a discarded tackle knife. The next few minutes were a blur. Out of its element, the shark snapped and thrashed, creating chaos. Eli aimed blindly, stabbing at its thick belly again and again. The water around them turned red, a sickening mix of seawater and blood. Then it was over. The shark, its relentless energy finally depleted, went still. Eli collapsed, trembling, his leg throbbing, his breath ragged gasps against the quiet lap of waves. Only as the first gray light of dawn crept over the ocean did he cut himself free from the line and limp towards the controls. The boat lurched forward, leaving the shark carcass bobbing in its wake. Eli didn't look back. Instead, he steered towards the shore, the pain fading against determination. He had survived, but the experience would mark him forever. Once his playground, the ocean now held a darkness he hadn't known before. That night, he made a silent promise. No more solo excursions. No more seeking out the monsters of the deep. Some challenges weren't worth the price, and a man should know when the sea had won the round. The air shimmered with the relentless summer heat of Western Australia's coastline. It was January 2011, a stolen weekend where worries melted away like ice cream in the sun. For Maya Bennett, fresh from the green chill of Tasmania, it was an escape into a world of endless blue. Her three best friends, boisterous Jess, easygoing Tim, and quiet, thoughtful Ryan, had lured her west with promises of sun-drenched beaches and a laid-back vibe miles away from their hectic city lives. Now they sprawled on their towels, laughter ringing over the crash of waves. This cove, tucked away and a long drive from the tourist haunts, was their slice of paradise. The water gleamed with a deceptively inviting turquoise hue, masking the depths below. Maya, still getting used to the mainland strength of the sun, loved the feel of warm sand between her toes, the salty breeze teasing her hair. She'd always preferred the mountains to the ocean. Growing up in the shadow of Cradle Mountain had fostered a love of rocky heights and cool forests, not the relentless rhythm of the tides or the sunburn already stinging her shoulders. But the ocean's endless horizon offered freedom she couldn't quite find on solid ground. The others were already heading for the water, their shouts playful over the sound of the surf. Maya, usually the cautious one, felt a surge of recklessness. This trip was about letting go and embracing warmth and spontaneity in a way that wasn't always easy for her. The water was shockingly cold, a delicious contrast to the day's heat. Tim challenged her to a race. Jess did her usual goofy cannonball, and Maya, laughing, let herself be pulled into their boisterous fun. This was what life was supposed to feel like. Simple joy, friendship, and the thrill of being young and untamed on this vast, wild coastline. But beneath the clear water, a dark shape moved. Great whites patrolled this ocean stretch, drawn further offshore by the seal colonies. It was a fact Maya had filed away alongside warnings about snakes and sunburn. This remote possibility barely flickered across her carefree mood. Maya noticed something odd about Ryan's behavior as she floated further out. He was treading water, but his usual easygoing expression had vanished, replaced by a tense stillness. A hint of unease tightened her carefree mood, and she called out to him. Instead of answering, Ryan turned and gestured for them all to head back to shore. His urgency was apparent, but the unthinkable happened before Maya could warn her friends. The change in the water was almost imperceptible initially, a slight ripple that went unnoticed by the laughing group. Then an eruption of water churned scarlet, and Jess's shriek pierced the air. One moment she was splashing playfully, the next, something massive yanked her under with horrifying force. Maya froze, her mind unable to process the sudden shift from paradise to nightmare. She saw a dark fin slicing through the water, shockingly close to shore. A great white, its monstrous form visible just below the surface. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow as the predator circled back, drawn by the scent of blood and thrashing limbs. Tim, the closest to the attack zone, propelled himself furiously toward his friend, fueled by a desperate mix of courage and terror. Panic threatened to engulf Maya, but a primal instinct kicked in. Ryan was closest to shore, frantically doggy paddling towards the safety of the sand. She screamed a wordless warning, her voice filled with a desperate urgency she'd never known. The shark, seemingly disoriented by the sudden chaos, gave them a precious few seconds. Tim reached Jess, now eerily still. He started pulling her back, every kick pushing them further from the predator's jaws. Maya scanned the bloody water, desperately seeking her friend. Where was Jess? Where was the shark? Had it lost interest, sated by its kill? Then a flash of white. The massive fish surged from the depths, its gaping maw a terrifying sight. Tim dragging Jess's dead weight was a pitifully slow target. Maya let out a scream, a futile, despairing sound. Time seemed to stretch into agonizing slow motion. She watched the shark's sleek gray form like a missile drawing nearer. She saw Tim's face etched with horror. But in that heart-stopping moment, something shifted. The shark, almost upon them, swerved with unnatural agility. Had it spotted easier prey? A flicker of movement, then a cry cut short as Ryan disappeared below the surface. Frantic, Maya scanned the waves, searching for any sign of her friend. But the ocean, so recently a playground, was now a scene of pure carnage. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the predator was gone, leaving a trail of crimson and floating debris as a grim testament to its passing. Maya dragged herself onto the sand, collapsing into the rough grains. Her whole body trembled, sobs racking her frame. Two of her friends, just gone. The idyllic beach now felt tainted with horror, the air still vibrating with screams and the sickening metallic scent of blood. Tim knelt beside her, his face drained of color, Jess's blood dripping from his hands. He held her gaze, his eyes filled with a chilling mix of despair and guilt. In the distance, sirens wailed, jarring in their world of shock and grief. Help arrived, statements were given, and survivors were comforted with empty words and too strong tea. But for those left behind, there was no comfort, no going back. The ocean, their brief paradise, had become a graveyard. The brutal reality of nature's power shattered their stolen weekend of laughter and warmth. Maya would carry the scars of this horrific day. The images, the guilt, the knowledge that life was precarious, even in the most beautiful places. In the end, the most dangerous predators didn't always lurk in deep water. Sometimes they swam unseen right beside you, shattering innocence with a single terrible strike.